If one day Drew listens to this, I wonder what she'll hear first. Will she hear her dad trying too hard to sound wise? Will she laugh at the way I used to talk? Or will she catch the one thing I've been trying to say since the day she was born? That I was here, I was paying attention, and that I loved her on purpose. I didn't make this podcast because I had answers. I made it because I had questions and a daughter. Welcome to Ladylike, the Girl Dad podcast. I'm Anton. Today's episode's a little different. It's just me, no guest, just a dad with a mic. And this is the story behind the show and your host, the fear, the joy, and the love that started it all. If you're thinking to yourself, oh brother, we just got this guy, where are the incredible women? I promise they'll be back, but I wanted to give you an episode that was more of me. And I set it up pretty similarly to how I would set up the normal questions for the interviews that I do on Ladylike. I have some prompts and questions that I've given myself, and I'm going to answer them. The hope is that you get to know me a little bit better and the heart behind the show. There is a Dear Drew after this, and it's at the end of the episode. It's my favorite one I've ever written, so stay tuned for that. But for now, we'll jump right into the questions. First question. What's a moment from your own childhood that shaped how you show up as a father today? Starting out with a really hard hitter. I don't feel like my parents lived or chose their life with intention. I feel like for them, having kids was the right next thing to do, so they did it, and there was a lot of repercussions from that. I feel like since they didn't choose where they were going, it caused some rifts in their marriage because things were not intentional. There was not a path laid out before them. So when I was a kid, I experienced their divorce, one of my family members' drug abuse, one of my family members had an affair, and there was years of estrangement from them. It sucked. And it was the hardest thing I've ever been through. In the wake of that pain, I tried to pull my life back together, and I had this singular focus that no matter what I did when I grew up, when I became a quote unquote adult, I would lead and love well. And of course, I don't do that perfectly to this day, but it drives everything I do. I recognize the scared boy that I was, and I think if I didn't live my life with intention, I'd be failing him. And so my pain gave me purpose, and that purpose has taken me to places that I could never have imagined, especially when I was sitting across from CPS at 16 or 17 years old when they were asking about my living conditions. I never would have thought I would be here. And so that is what I hope Drew inherits from me. The knowledge that my love for her is intentional. From this podcast, the way I love her mother, I want her to know that I choose this life every day. Okay, it looks like question number 2 is a little bit lighter, which I'm thankful for. It's, what's the dumbest thing you've done as a new dad? I can't think of a ton of dumb things that I've done, but one that really sticks out is I have a Duna car seat, and I thought I was setting it up right for the longest time, and recently was riding somewhere with my wife, and she was like, "You didn't lock the seatbelt." And I had no idea what she was talking about. And so I discovered that you're supposed to pull the thing tight so that it locks after you buckle it in, so the car seat doesn't move at all. I have no idea why I didn't think of that, but that's probably the dumbest thing I've done as a new dad. Okay, we're back into some of the more intense questions, it looks like. So question number 3 is, what did you learn about being a man from your mom? And what did you learn from her absence? I genuinely believe my mother is very tenderhearted and never, ever, ever meant to harm any of her kids. But a lot of things went wrong. CPS was called when I was a teenager. And if I think back on it, I think that my mom chose comfort over the hard path a lot of the time. She chose the easy way out rather than the hard way. And so that's something I learned from her, to not repeat, that you can either face the pain of doing the hard thing right now or face the pain of the bad choices later. And I don't think my mom was absent from my life. I think I was absent from hers. When I was younger, I had like this codependent relationship with her where I really wanted to fix her. Like I begged her to stop smoking and I just wanted to see her better. And then eventually I realized that I had to stop and that was her path to walk and I had my path to walk. And so we didn't talk for a couple of years. Our relationship is great now, and she's around. It's certainly different than it was when I was a kid, but um, definitely what I've learned from my mother about being a man is taking the hard road sometimes, even when you don't want to, so they don't have to face the pain of the bad choices later. Okay, next question. Have you ever been so tired you did something completely nonsensical while parenting? I actually have a very specific memory for this question. There was a night when we had our foster son where he was crying. It was like 3 a.m. and I got up and I went to make him a bottle in the kitchen. And I didn't turn on any of the lights because normally if I turn those lights on, it wakes everybody up. So I left everything off, made the bottle, started walking back towards his room. And when I walk in his doorway, I see this figure in his room. It is a girl in a white robe, long black hair. I immediately screamed and fell to the ground and was terrified. And then Anna turns around and screams at the top of her lungs. It was Anna in her nightgown, soothing our foster son. That definitely wouldn't have happened if I wasn't so tired and nonsensical, but I, for real, did not know that was her and thought I saw a ghost in his room. So that's a good one. Okay, next question. Where were you physically and emotionally when the idea of Ladylike first clicked? I think I have like two answers to this question. The first one is that the idea of Ladylike is still clicking. Like I'm still learning how to do this podcast and create a podcast in general. I think I'm 7 episodes in and getting better every time, I hope, but that's still growing. But like the heart behind Ladylike, I think I can pin down to one specific moment when I had my foster son. I had to do a 3 a.m. feed with him. I'm up in the middle of the night making a bottle and giving it to him. And it really clicked for me and gave me empathy for my parents, realizing that somebody did this for me. I'm still alive, which means somebody did a 3 a.m. feed with me at some point. And I really wish that I could remember that version of my parents because there was so much hardship through my teenage years that it taints a lot of my memory of the earlier years of my life when I'm sure they were doing a great job of taking care of me. So part of this podcast is a memory for Drew, proof that I was here and that I was invested and that I was trying and showing up. Hopefully she doesn't even need this. Like hopefully in her 20s she looks back and remembers her loving father being around the whole time and there's no need for me to show proof that I was there when I was younger, but it's cathartic in some ways to acknowledge the loss that I had and try to give that twofold over to my daughter. It's also accountability. I don't want to look back in 15 years and say I created a podcast about fatherhood, but then failed as being a father. So I think the act of doing this and the act of listening to women is accountability and is making me a better father. So to tie it up, Ladylike hasn't clicked per se, it's still growing, but that's the heart behind it. Next question is, what's your most confident parenting moment that immediately backfired? I have a quick answer for that. I love throwing Drew up in the air over my face. Recently, I did that and she threw up directly on my face. And so that was a great confident moment that immediately backfired. Next question. You could have made any podcast. Why this one? That's a funny question because I actually did try to create another podcast. I started this other one called Project Proficiency, where I tackled challenge to prove that with time, effort, and willpower, you can get good at anything. So it was like me learning how to play golf from never having picked up a golf club. The idea was that I wanted to show Drew that really, you can do anything you put your mind to if you put enough time and effort into it. But after a few episodes, I realized it was a little bit too much about me. It didn't feel like a gift to her. It felt more like a performance. And so that's when Ladylike was born. Now the idea is to listen and to give Drew the wisdom of other women, and she gets to watch me grow up with her. And so I think this is way more aligned with the actual heart of what I was trying to accomplish. Next question. When did you realize that listening to women wasn't just noble, but necessary? So I think it's pretty obvious with some of the ways I answered the earlier questions that I had some pretty traumatic and low moments in my life, especially around my teenage years. In those really low moments, I had really incredible women help me rebuild my life. I'm going to shout them out right now. Hopefully they listen. I don't even know if they listen to the podcast. I probably have never properly thanked them, but their voices still echo in how I live my life today. So here we go. Shout out to Sharon Stolley, Julie Crocker, Mrs. Swayze, Christy Tracy, and Sarah Saxton Frump. They all believed in me when life had me on the ropes. They saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself. And in moments when I felt like abandoned and small, they trusted me with positions of honor and responsibility. And in doing that, they reminded me of who I could be despite the things that had happened to me in my life up to that point. Also, my boss and CEO, Celeste Madison, has definitely helped shape who I am, especially in my career. And so, very thankful for that as well. And then, of course, last but never least, is my wife. I think she might be a saint on this earth. Her heart for foster kids and orphans and the downtrodden, I don't know, the people who are sad. It humbles me. She like really goes out of her way to help people, and it blows my mind all the time. So every time I've listened to women like them, I've become a better man. So that's when I realized that listening to women is necessary. Alrighty, next question. What's something you've learned about storytelling since starting the podcast? I've learned that it's really hard to capture someone's genuine story, which makes sense. It's hard to ask people to tell about the hardest thing they're going through in their life on the internet where it never goes away and anybody can listen to it. That's hard. So I've learned that that takes a lot of effort and vulnerability from my end and trust. Um, Another thing I've learned is that if you have 5 ring lights in the back of your car, it can be really embarrassing. Like if you got pulled over by a cop and they asked, "Sir, why do you have 5 ring lights in the back of your car? Are you an influencer?" Then you have to answer, I'm a 30-year-old white dude trying to make a podcast. Storytelling's hard. Next question. Is there a moment when you wanted to quit the podcast? This summer, I tried to pack a bunch of episodes in before I came up to Aspen for 6 weeks. And so I was contacting potential guests and inviting them and doing like back to back to back days. But then I had, I think, 3 or 4 episodes fall through in a row. I think two guests pulled out because they didn't want to answer questions, which I get. They're hard questions to answer. And there were people that I knew had stories that could really help Drew one day. I didn't want to push people into vulnerability, but I also didn't want to make like a surface level podcast with no heart. And so there was a lot of conflict right there in my mind of whether I needed to continue or dial back what I was doing. I also lost 4 episodes in a row, which if you're trying to make a consistent podcast is devastating. But then I relaxed a little bit and realized that this is not about being perfect. It's about growing. That's kind of been the whole thing the whole time. So I kept on going. Next question. How has your wife reacted to the whole podcast journey? Be honest. Be honest. Actually, kind of along the same lines as my last answer. I think my wife loves the idea of the podcast, but she hates how rigid I can be with deadlines, quality control, and making sure the editing is perfect. I really care about it being great. And sometimes I think she gets jealous of the amount of time I spend on the podcast. And that's usually a cue to me to chill out and take her on a date and relax a little bit. But for the record, she's the reason I'm doing this. She believes in me when I don't. She keeps me grounded. She listens to my billion ideas of the podcast and what we could do and who we could bring on. She's incredible and she's amazing. Next question. How has Drew changed your definition of success? That is a really good question and something I'm still currently working through. But before Drew, success for me was provision. It was paying for college, making sure she was taken care of, buying a house, all those types of things were success. I think success now, of course, I want to continue to be successful in my career, but if my daughter has a relationship with me in her 20s and likes me, I think that would be a huge win. And if she knows how loved she is genuinely by me and the intentionality of what I do and how I'm doing it, that would be success. That's what I'm shooting for right now. In sales, I think a lot about if you do your daily tasks over and over, then you'll be successful on the long run. And I think with parenting, it's funny because some of those things are living and breathing right now. Where if I do the dishes at night and make sure all the bottles are clean, or if I change all the poopy diapers so that Anna doesn't have to change them, then I'm doing the things today that are going to set me up on the long term. I'm basically trying to be Mark Wahlberg from Instant Family. If I can just do the little things, it'll all work out. Okay, next question. What's the smallest parenting win that made you feel like a superhero? Well, I think, of course, the first time I made Drew laugh, like a belly laugh, that was a huge win for me. Another thing is, Anna has actually been out of town as I'm recording. She's at a bachelorette party in Austin, and I have been doing the night duty with Drew. And so I tried some sleep training techniques that I've heard about, and they are working, y'all. She is sleeping through the night. It's a huge win. It's been incredible. What's the most dad thing you've got yourself doing lately? Honestly, since Drew's been born, I have done a ton of dad things. I picked up the game of golf, which I kind of talked about earlier. I've done a bunch of home remodeling projects, built a shed. I used smart lights throughout our house and put Amazon Alexas everywhere so that we don't have to actually use the light switch. I've started to care more about the condition of our yard. I've started going on nightly walks with Drew. I'm really waiting for the big dad things to start happening though. When I get into like bird watching or keeping stats on a baseball game, y'all will know I've fully transformed into a dad. Next question. Do you think you're becoming the kind of man you want Drew to fall in love with or emulate? I certainly hope so, but I do think becoming takes time and energy. It doesn't just happen. I definitely don't always get it right. And I'm growing and learning every day, but I hope she sees me trying, and I hope she sees me apologizing to her and her mom. And I hope she sees me love people well, which is actually a very important point. The person that I hope Drew falls in love with, the thing that I hope for the most in them is that they're the type of person that would be humble enough to know that they still need to grow, that they still need to apologize and listen and be patient with themselves and others, because it does take so much time. And if I was the same person that I was when I started dating Anna now, that would be a horrible thing. I'm glad that I've grown and I'm glad that I've worked through things. Next question. When you pray for Drew, what do you ask for? I'm not sure that I'm necessarily asking anything. I'm praying with hope a lot of times. Like, I would ideally like to see these things, but I'm not necessarily saying, hey, can you do this? But I pray that she lives with intention, and I pray that she becomes like her mom. That would be the best. Next question. If Drew binge listens to this podcast at 18, what do you hope she understands about her dad? Oof. That is the question at the end of the episode that I always ask to make people cry. Like Cortland, shout out Cortland and Aaron. I'm just kidding. I don't do that to make them cry, but it usually does happen. On the real though, I hope she hears my heart. And I hope she knows I'd do anything for her, including spending 17 hours a week building this podcast while also working a full-time job and parenting and trying to be a good husband. I hope she sees all that. I hope she hears how to turn hardship into beauty through the stories of the women that are on the podcast and through my story. Okay, another question that I always include on the podcast, another one that can sometimes provoke tears. What's something your younger self would be shocked to know about your life now? This one actually might be the hardest to answer. I think everything would be a shock to my younger self. I could not have imagined the success I've had in my career, the lovely marriage that I'm in, the family that I have, the place that I live. None of that would have been in the realm of possibility for what I thought I could do when I was younger. Which again, I talked about earlier, the incredible women that have spoken value into me in my life, but I know for sure that I would not be who I am without them. And I really didn't believe in some of my goals and aspirations until they believed in them too and believed in them for me. And so my younger self would be totally shocked and totally amazed and overjoyed. I know he would be overjoyed and so ecstatic. Last question, it looks like. If your granddaughter asked what was Ladylike about Grandpa, how would you answer? It is a weird question. Shout out to my wife and ChatGPT for collaborating on these questions that they thought would reveal my character and the heart behind the podcast. But that's a weird one. I guess my answer would be um, it was about living with gentleness and strength and making space for the stories you don't get to hear very often. Oh, also, it was for girl dads, daughters, and the women who they're becoming. Never mind. There are a couple more questions in the bonus round that I did not see until just now. All right, this one is, if Drew could roast you right now as a baby, what would she say? Probably something like, my dad is making a podcast but doesn't like small talk. My dad likes to talk in an Australian accent, even though he's horrible at it. Does it all the time. Or like, my dad makes a podcast but tries to show up late to church because he gets social anxiety and doesn't want to talk to people. Honestly, she could probably roast me. Okay, it looks like the next question is a very similar vein. If your podcast mic could talk, what do you think it would say about you? It would probably say something like, I took it way too seriously at first, trying to perfect my voice and tone, which is very cringe now, or something like, what happened to all the other things you said that got edited out, that type of thing. I hope there's no more questions like that. Thankfully, there were not any more questions. Now it's time for the Dear Drew. Dear Drew, one day you might stumble across this episode. Maybe you're curious. Maybe you're cringing. Maybe you're wondering what kind of guy decides to make a podcast instead of just writing a journal like a normal dad. But if you're listening, I hope you hear this. I didn't grow up knowing how to do this well. I didn't have a blueprint for how to love with intention, but I had pain, and pain, when paid attention to, can become purpose. That's what this is. You changed the way that I define success. It's not just about what I can provide. It's about who I can become. For you, for your mom, for the family I never thought I'd be able to build. Every time I sing to you while changing a poopy diaper, every time I take on a guest story with care, every time I mess up and apologize, I'm building something. You. I pray you live with intention. I pray you're like your mom, brave, loving, and strong. I pray you never mistake my seriousness about this project as distance. This podcast is a love letter with a mic. If you binge listen to this someday, I hope you hear how many women have changed my life, how much your mom anchors my world, and how fiercely I have tried not to be perfect, but to be present. So if someone ever asks you what your dad was like, I hope you can say he listened, he learned, and he loved me on purpose. Love, Dad. Hey guys, thanks again for listening to Ladylike. I know this episode was a little bit different, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for the podcast, feel free to DM us on Instagram and TikTok at Ladylike Pod. Go to our website, ladylikepodcast.com, where you can fill out a form to be a guest or provide feedback via the contact form. Next week, we'll be back with a normal episode with Catherine Chang. I'm really excited to share her story. She's one of my best friends, and so it's going to be great. Until then, thank you again for listening. We'll see you soon.